Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway. I'm glad you chose to join me for this particular sermon. This is my pre-Thanksgiving sermon. This Sunday is the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is an important part of our lives. In fact, Paul would tell us that Thanksgiving is kind of central to what we are as Christians. I am struck very much by a passage in Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 12, where the Apostle Paul talks to us about what a life of thankfulness should bring in our character and in our attitude and in the way in which we approach life in every aspect. I'll be talking a little bit about to live thankfully. That whole concept is interesting to me. I was caught by particularly a word that Paul uses 3 times in this particular chapter. It is a word from which we get our English word endued, and we often use that word when we're talking about a person being endued with authority for an office or endued for a type of position or a place of power. That word actually is a Greek word which means to clothe, and it's translated in this particular passage as put on or clothe yourself with, as it were. It's used twice here in that sense. It's also the negative of it is used as well by the Apostle Paul here, where he says put off these things or take off this kind of clothing. And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of how thankfulness impacts what we put on or the attitude that we put on in our life. And the Apostle Paul is pretty clear about some of these things. I'd like to read these particular verses to you. This is from the English Standard Version of the New Testament, but I would like to read these to you, and I want you to think about what Paul is saying. I'm going to begin in verse 12. And the first word he uses is the word endue or endued. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if anyone has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Wow. Thankfulness is pretty important in our attitude. It's pretty important in the way in which we approach other people, the way in which we approach life. The word thankful is actually a word that is developed from the Greek word for grace. It means literally, if you were to translate it very literally, good grace is what thanksgiving means. It means to speak well of or good grace. The word in Greek is Eucharisto. It's also a term that we use for the Christian observance of communion or the Lord's Supper. It is a word which means or reflects upon the grace that has been given to us, and we are thankful or we respond to that good grace given to us that transforms us and changes us. And Paul says that the changes that it brings about in our life is that we begin to have compassion upon other people. We begin to care about how our lives impact others and how it touches their lives. And he uses 2 very, very strong words there. They are words which talk about the feeling that comes from the very guts inside of us. So it's that concept of compassion for other people. Also, he uses a word that we translate as kindness, but it literally means integrity of the person or the character. Kindness is how we treat other people. It's that integrity in our lives. Jesus would tell us that that type of kindness is the idea that we do unto others as we would have them do unto us. So it is an integrity issue with us. The next word he talks about is humility. And that idea of humility is not thinking too much of yourself, but thinking about how you are perceived by others. Meekness, and that is a really neat word. It means to literally be gentle of nature. And I like that idea of being gentle of nature. So if we are to be clothed with what God wants us to be clothed with, we are going to be people of gentle nature. And then we are going to be long-suffering. The Greek word there is long-suffering. Greek actually has two words for patience. This one is long-suffering, and it means to put up with things for a long time before you lose your cool. And it also, we see in verse 13 that we bear with other people. There are times when we understand that people around us are not always on their best behavior or having their best day. And so we bear with them and we kind of support them. The word literally means to support another. And so that concept of bearing with another person, and also extending grace to those who may be complaining about us or complaining to us. And we need grace for other people. In fact, as I said to you, that word thanksgiving, buried in that word is the word grace, and that's the word that's used here. And we often translate it as forgiveness, but the idea is extending grace to other people in their worst moments. And the Apostle Paul says we do that because Jesus Christ extended grace to us. And because he extended grace to us in our fallen nature, our fallen state, we are expected to extend grace to others when they are not always on their best behavior. And then he says the most important article of clothing, as it were, that we put on as Christians is selfless love. A love which sees the needs of others before we see our own. That's selfless love. Those things bind it all together for us as a Christian, and they allow for harmony, which is the goal of our Christian faith. And if we do that, then the peace of Christ will literally referee, as the Greek word means there, will referee our hearts, because we are called together to be one people. And we are called together to be thankful. And being thankful means that we have a different attitude. As Christians, we begin to live differently. If we don't, then we aren't really thankful. And I am so grateful to Jesus Christ for what he did for me. I hope you are as well. And if you are, that should change the way you behave and the way you act, because we are members of God's kingdom. God bless you. You have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Hope to see you in church. Take care. God bless.